Welcome back to another episode of the Inquisitive Mamba podcast, episode 45. We have a lot to get into in tonight's show. Back here on the West Coast, per usual. Episode 45, MLB, a little bit of that, NBA, NFL, and college football. So first off, the highlight of tonight's show for me for these first few minutes of the NFL will be about Zach Wilson. A lot of the media this past couple days since the game on Sunday against the Patriots, in a game they lost 10-3, which was on the last play of the game from Marcus Jones, who returned the punt. So Zach Wilson. So is it, are we ready to, turn the page on him? Are we ready to, bench him? Well, for me, I know he's only been a starter for right around a year now, and he's still very young in this league. But the Jets, in my opinion, are ready to win now. And the thing about the Jets that really gets me is they have the pieces. Watching them against that in that Patriots game with their front seven, with Quinnen Williams, Quincy Williams, some of their other guys, and then their back end, obviously with Sauce Gardner, who's been an amazing rookie all year. You look and you go, I really just think Zach Wilson is holding this team back. And they have offensive pieces. Obviously, I know they lost, Brees Hall, and they still have, Michael Carter. Corey Davis, went down earlier this year, but, they got a playmaker in Elijah Moore, who had a, good rookie year last year at Ole Miss. And he really hasn't even gotten the ball. And, it just goes to show you that Zach Wilson is holding his team back. And just his attitude, on the field, off the field, and then really got me, which is, this is a huge story, was the reporters, asked him a question, and he goes, they asked him, do you think you let the team down? And he goes, no. Well, I understand it's a team game and there's 52 people on the roster, but, the quarterback, holds the most weight, which we all understand that. So, you sit there and you go, you're a player on the team and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into the game, every week in and week out, you practice every day, and your quarterback, or you think your franchise quarterback, the guy you drafted number 2 out of BYU, and he sits there and he goes, no. Well, he should be the one that is taking the blame for that loss. And I understand, you can sit there and, watch the tape and go, well, some receivers weren't getting separation or this and that, but this isn't the first game from Zach Wilson where he's played like this. This has, been a reoccurrence with him. And it's really starting to get me, his attitude and the way he just handles himself. If you're a leader of the team, you sit there and you take the blame for it. Most of the quarterbacks around the league have, played, piss poor before and have taken the blame for it. It's not the first time that Zach Wilson has been in this type of situation. So if I'm Robert Saleh, I'm sitting there and I'm reevaluating that quarterback position for the rest of the season. I know they got, Mike White and Joe Flacco left on the roster. Those are the two quarterbacks, but yeah, I think you really need to sit Zach Wilson down and, really, put him in his place. It just doesn't really seem like he wants to, he really cares. And I know, sometimes he shows flashes, and, sometimes, he'll, like I said, show flashes, but he'll also take a step back, and you just really, you haven't gotten there with him yet. And there's been other situations with other quarterbacks around the league, even a few years ago with the Josh Rosen thing. They moved on from Josh Rosen, the Cardinals did, right away, and they figured out, well, maybe the Jets need to move on from Zach Wilson and just, close that chapter and go, hey, we appreciate everything you gave us, basically just a mutual, agreement at the end of this year. I'm just not there yet with him, and I haven't been. And just the careless turnovers and just his, the way he plays. So that's a little bit of Zach Wilson, and I will get into that Patriots Jets game in a little bit. But how about that Chargers Chiefs game on Sunday night? It's always an instant classic between these two teams, and with Mahomes and Herbert going up and at it, it feels just like every game they play, it's just a shootout, a dogfight. It comes down to the wire, and just when you thought the Chargers had it in the bag, they gave Mahomes right around a minute 30 left, and he marched right down the field, and they ended up winning the game with who else? Travis Kelce. Mahomes and Travis Kelce, the best duo in football? I would say yes. But just another instant classic between those two teams. Moving on to the Vikings and the Cowboys, a game where it was penciled in on your schedule midway through this season, where the Vikings were 8-1 and the Cowboys were 6-3 after the game they just came off losing against Green Bay, and a tough loss for them. But in my opinion, the way that game really came about when it first started, I guess it was from the first snap with Micah Parsons when he ran around Darisaw and he sacked Kirk Cousins in that opening play and they got the ball back. I personally think that changed the entire momentum of that game. It really, really got to me. And I was like watching it on my TV, and I'm like, this game completely changed after that play. And from there on out, the Cowboys dominated that game with 7 sacks on defense. They didn't turn back, and they just looked lights out. And the Cowboys have a great defense. They really do. And their secondary, can be a little skeptical at times, but their front seven is just a force with Lawrence, Parsons, um, Vander Esch. I mean, they have good pieces, just all around on that front seven. And it's week in and week out. They're just coming. I mean, they're sending guys like, at you left and right. Just the way that Dan Quinn is dialing up those blitzes, the way that, he's got those guys playing, they're believing. And, I don't like Mike McCarthy as a head coach. I never have. But I mean, when you've got Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn, kind of running the show, which for Kellen Moore for the offense and Dan Quinn for the defense, I mean, you're going to be okay. And this is another thing, too. I'm just going to throw this in here. If they can add Odell Beckham Jr. to that offense, oh my goodness. Gallup is just starting to kind of come around. You got Pollard and Zeke, together. I'm not the biggest Zeke fan. Pollard had a hell of a game. I think he finished, on the day with 106 receiving yards. I mean, that wheel route that Dak threw to him was the bread and butter. That was beauty. But yeah, no, that's just kind of my feeling on the Cowboys. They have the offense, but if they can add a guy like Odell Beckham, and I know Odell's kind of, he's coming off that big ACL injury. He's hurt, his knee. He's gotten 2 ACL surgeries in the past, but just if Odell is half the player that he was for the Rams, he could just provide a huge spark to this Cowboys offense. And the Cowboys O-line has been kind of underrated. They were, they came in pretty banged up this year, and they've been great. How about that rookie Tyler Smith out of Tulsa? He's just been a force to be reckoned with. But I want to briefly talk about that Packers and Titans game. The Titans ended up winning 27-17, and I was really in on that game. And I was thinking, oh man, the Packers beat the Cowboys last week. Can you have any faith in them? I remember I said on last week's show, I'm still not, I'm not there yet on the Packers. And can you trust them? No, and clearly you can, especially after the game. But the rookie Christian Watson has 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games, 3 against the Cowboys, 2 against the Titans. So we'll leave it at that. But the Titans, they play that smash mouth type of football. They run ground and pound you on the game. They'll punch you in the mouth. And how about David Long and Jeffrey Simmons kind of just controlling that game from the line of scrimmage? So those are my little thoughts on the Packers and the Titans. Moving on back to the Patriots and the Jets. Mac Jones didn't even play bad. I think he was 23 of 27 with 246 yards, and you can look that up, but I'm pretty sure he was. And I just think it's Matt Patricia holding his team back. Mac Jones is not turning the ball over like he was in the beginning of the year, but obviously the Patriots don't have the playmakers that a lot of the other teams have, especially on the outside, the vertical side. But they do have the run game and the two-headed monster with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, and just the way those 2 guys are running the ball is exceptionally well. But the problem with the Patriots is their offensive line, and it's weird to say that because in recent years the Patriots offensive line has been exceptionally well. It's been lights out. But David Andrews, he went down with a thigh injury. He missed I think it was 2 games before because of a concussion. And on the outside, Trent Brown hasn't really lived up to it this year. I mean, the Jets really dominated that game from the line of scrimmage. I mean, I think they had 6 or 7 sacks as well. So I mean, they dominated that game from the line of scrimmage. But like I said, Mac Jones didn't play bad, and he didn't play exceptionally well, but he didn't turn the ball over. And the Patriots were moving the ball at times. I mean, they missed the 2 field goals, but don't get me wrong about that Patriots and the Jets game. The Patriots controlled that game, not from the line of scrimmage, but they won that game. I know they won on the punt return, but I personally think they won that game, fair and square. I think, it was going to come down to obviously, last possession, and hey, so be it. They won on a punt return. But crazy Jets average stat here. They averaged 2.77 inches per play in the second half. Zach Wilson threw the ball 9 times. 9 times. He had 9 passes. So, but yeah, the Patriots, Marcus Jones, little rookie out of Houston, another gem from Belichick. It was the first punt return from a player for this season for a touchdown. Pretty cool. So the Patriots this week, they have the Vikings coming up, which should be a good game. The Vikings are obviously going to be favored, coming off that brutal loss against the Cowboys, but I think it'll be a good game. I'm hoping so, at least, especially on Thanksgiving. You want to eat some turkey, you want to watch some football, and hopefully that's the good primetime game. It's on NBC. Good primetime game. Moving on to the Raiders and the Broncos quickly. Devontae Adams, he dominated that game from start to finish, and he actually caught the game-winning touchdown in overtime. Crushing the Broncos' hopes of any sort of wild card or whatever you want to call it that they thought that they would get themselves into. And I was really high on the Broncos at the beginning of this year, and I'm still disappointed in them. And, obviously they just haven't really lived up to it. But this is what really got me. Devontae Adams said that Pat Surtain, the sensational corner out of Alabama, who's been great the past, this is his 2nd season now And he said he's not there yet. Well, I don't think it's fair to say is he not there yet, because obviously, you're guarding, they're covering the, guarding the number one receiver, week in and week out. And Sertan has definitely done that. And Devontae Adams is obviously no slouch. So is it fair to really say he's not there yet? I don't think so. But I mean, he did get eaten alive in that game. There was a couple routes that I saw that, Devontae had him, but Devontae's obviously, arguably one of the best route runners in the NFL. So, it totally makes sense. But to say that he's not there yet, I don't think that's fair to say. I'm sticking with that one. So Niners blow out the Cardinals last night on Monday Night Football, 38-10. Colt McCoy looked like he was trying to turn back the clock in the beginning of the game, but Shanahan had other plans for Cliff Kingsbury, and just the offensive juggernaut. And like I said, Elijah Mitchell, he's back. He looks good from that knee injury. I think he missed weeks 2 through 9, and he's back now. McCaffrey was good per usual. Deebo Samuel was lights out. Nothing, no surprise there. But Jimmy G played great. I mean, you can rip on Jimmy G all you want, but he's been pretty solid this year. But let's see if Jimmy G can sustain that throughout the rest of the season. But that Eagles Colts game was really close. The Colts ended up losing by 1 point. I know Jeff Saturday picked up his win last week against the Raiders in a 24-20 battle, but the Eagles, they found a way to win. And how about Trey Sirianni at the end of the game taunting Colts fans, Frank Reich's former team? And I think it definitely had something to do with that. And that game was personal for a guy like Trey Sirianni. And that game really got me. Late in the fourth quarter, AJ Brown fumbled, and then Jonathan Taylor fumbled, and then the Eagles ended up pulling away with that 1 point victory. So it'll be interesting to see how the Colts finish the rest of the season. Now they're 4-6-1, but we talked about the NFL for a little bit. Now we're going to shift our focus to college football. We're going to talk briefly about college football, and then we'll get into a little bit of NBA and talk like a minute or two about the MLB, and we'll wrap it up for tonight's show. How about that USC UCLA recap? I'm watching that game for the most part in DTR. If you don't know who DTR is, Dorian Thompson Robinson. I talked about him on last week's episode, as well as Caleb Williams, a juggernaut from Southern California, right over here. And obviously he's from Washington, D.C., but, obviously plays for USC. And what really got me was that game was just so back and forth. And UCLA had a 14-0 lead to start that game. And then USC kind of crept back in it. They got the momentum. The high-powered offense really started to show. And really what it was is Dorian Thompson Robinson played a great game, but it was a turnovers for him. I think he had 2 interceptions, and then that interception at the end of the game really costed them. But, recap of that game, it was 48-45, high scoring all throughout. Jordan Addison, I think, had a $180 on the day. Williams had 494. Dorian Thompson Robinson, I think he had over, right around 250, 260. So, I mean, it was a good game overall. But, Lincoln Riley, comes out on top, and he, proves to, UCLA that they are the better team. And, it really went to show you that they think they are the better team. And now that they're in the Pac-12 championship, they're waiting to see who they're going to play next Friday. I think it's either going to be Washington or Oregon. I think Oregon will be a really good matchup for them, and I think Oregon will be in the matchup for them. Moving on to Tennessee's Hendon Hooker. Any chance of Tennessee, getting into the playoffs is completely over now with the injury of Hendon Hooker tearing his ACL. Brutal injury for him, who had a Heisman potential year. And it just really sucks for Tennessee fans, and obviously Hendon Hooker. But South Carolina, I guess they came to play, and they lit it up. Spencer Rattler in the day with 6 touchdowns. Thank God he did it against my Gators last week. But any chance of Tennessee getting into the playoffs is over now. Sadly, I mean they're going to get a good bowl game, but no chance of the playoffs now. My Florida Gators blundered at Vandy. That was a disappointing game, and coming into that game, I knew it was going to be a tough one. I think the Gators were favored by, I think it was 3. Don't quote me on that. It was something around there, but it was just, a rough game all around, and they were down by 16 at one point, and they ended up coming back close. They ended up losing 31-24, but that controversial targeting call on Ventrell Miller really got me. Was it targeting? I mean, he led with his shoulder, but anything close to the helmet, they're going to call, nowadays, obviously, trying to protect these players. And I get it, but I don't think it was targeting. I want to move on to Georgia versus Kentucky. Kentucky, they were ranked for most of the year, and now they're not ranked. Obviously, Levis went down with an injury. They lost to Vandy last week. He's been kind of banged up. What really got me in that game was Georgia's defense. They dominated from start to finish. I mean, Jalen Carter and Keely Ringo, I think, really controlled that game, especially Jalen Carter on the D line. I mean, he's probably going to go, between 1 to 5 in the draft. I mean, he was sensational in that game. But Georgia's defense really controlled that game, and Kentucky made a late push at the end, but they just couldn't, fend off Georgia at the end. But how about Kenny McIntosh, Georgia's running back? I think he ran for, somewhere around 130, 140, and Georgia dominated that game. Don't let the score, fool you. But it's impressive that they do this week in and week out, and they do it in different ways. They'll score a lot of points on you one week, and then the next week they won't score a lot, but their defense will show up. And I really think it's Georgia's just a force to be reckoned with, and that's super obvious. But it just each week they just impress me in different ways, and their star players show up. They just have the three-headed monster with McConkey, Bowers, and they have the freakish tight end Washington. So I mean, Georgia, they're that, like I said, back to last week's episode, that LSU Georgia game is going to be a hell of a game. It's going to be a lot of fun. LSU ended up beating UAB 41-10. About Georgia, LSU, a little bit. So, but yeah, SEC championship for them next week, and Georgia plays Georgia Tech this week. So it'll be interesting to see how that game will go. I'm sure they'll blow them out. But moving on to the Lane Kiffin rumors about Ole Miss and Auburn. This past week, we hear a lot of grumbles and rumbles about Lane Kiffin if he's going to go to Auburn. My quick thoughts on that. I personally think Lane Kiffin should take the Auburn job. And the reason why I think Lane Kiffin should take the Auburn job, because one, I think, overall they are a better program. They recruit better. They have more money. Their boosters are willing to, invest more into their coach than Ole Miss. I don't see Ole Miss going up any more than where they're at now. I think they've lost now. I think it's 2 games on the season. They're right around like actually, no, they lost actually this past week. So I just don't see Ole Miss, going up any further than where they're at now. I just don't see it really changing. So I personally think he should take the Auburn job before somebody else takes it. And I think he will take it. I know there's been a lot of, rumors and reports saying that, he told his players that he's all in at Ole Miss, but I just don't buy it. I don't buy it from Lane Kiffin. I just think Lane Kiffin will hop ship, and that's just the kind of coach he is. That's just the impression I get from him. I want to briefly talk about the OSU Michigan game coming up this week. OSU is ranked 2 and Michigan is ranked 3. Yes, we finally made it to Thanksgiving weekend of football, the last official regular season weekend of college football. McCarthy versus Stroud should be a hell of a game. Can you be impressed with Michigan last week against Illinois? Illinois is a solid team, but I do think it had a little bit to do with the potential injury of Blake Corum, Heisman potential running back, who's had a sensational year. Before at halftime he went down with that knee injury, and I really think that affected Michigan from the rest of the way, because their offense is heavily focused around him. So, but I think it'll be a good game. Overall, I do expect Ohio State to win. I think it'll be a close game though, but I'm gonna rock with Ohio State in this one. And if Michigan can pull off this win, that'll be amazing for college football, and it'll be amazing for Michigan fans in the Jim Harbaugh era, because he hasn't, been able to really, sustain his dominance against Ohio State. So it'll be interesting to see, how that game goes. And I really wish, Jackson Smith and Jigba was healthy this year, and we were able to see him for most of this year, but we haven't seen him, because of that hamstring injury he suffered in week 1 against Notre Dame. But I'm hoping for a great game, but I think I'm just going to have to go with OSU in this one. I have some Michigan fans, but I have to rock with OSU in this one. Moving on to the Florida FSU game, the Battle of the State of Florida. FSU is favored by 9.5 points. I got so many FSU fans. I got so many UF fans, and a lot of them really don't know about college football, like that, but they watch the game. But man, I just think 9.5 points in this one is a lot. I understand FSU is ranked 16th, and Florida's banged up, and they've had some issues with their program as of late. And Billy Napier's kind of finding his identity with this team. He's tried to find it throughout this year, and Richardson's shown flashes. He's been up and down, but I just think in an in-state rivalry game like this, SEC versus ACC, 9.5 points is just a little too much for me to hop on that train. So I'm going to take UF plus 9.5. That's just how I'm feeling. I think it'll be a close game. FSU is definitely the favorite. Florida has no business winning this game. FSU really should win this game. They're ranked 16th. So, but yeah, we talked about the NFL. We talked about college football. Briefly, I want to talk about the MLB. I'm a big Yankees fan, and I saw the reports about Aaron Judge potentially signing with the Giants, not signing with the Giants, and he landed in San Francisco, and because he's a hometown San Francisco Giants guy. So We shall see. I'm really hoping that that doesn't happen, but we have a long MLB offseason. Kershaw re-signed with the Dodgers. Bellinger was basically given away from the not the Blue Jays, the Dodgers, even though I saw some reports that he could go to the Blue Jays. So this MLB offseason winter will be interesting to see. But actually, just about an hour ago in the NBA, I'm briefly talking about the NBA. Patrick Beverley, DeAndre Ayton, and Devin Booker were involved in kind of a scrum basically, and AD had another sensational game. I think he finished with 31, 18, and 5. One of the first players since 1974 to have a certain stat line. I didn't read the exact number part of the stat line, but it was impressive. It was sensational. But LeBron missed his fifth game. But the Beverly Ayton Booker situation is going to be the highlight of the night. And Beverly went over to Ayton as he kind of like basically body slammed him into the ground. And I'm not one for violence on the court, but when you stand over a player like Ayton standing over Reeves like that and taunting him basically, because Booker basically took out Reeves. And I didn't really see, I didn't watch most of the game, but I did see, that ending. And I just thought like what Beverly did was, he lit a little bit of fire under the Lakers. Obviously, they've been struggling this season, even though they've won, 3 straight, even without LeBron. But, doing something like that is never called for. But you just know, being an NBA fan, that Pat Beverly is going to be involved in something like that somewhere along the way in the NBA season. It's going to happen, and it was bound to happen. And that was the first time this season, he's gotten into a scrap with the Lakers. Do I agree with it? No, but you have to stick up to your teammates, especially, a team that's struggling, and you have to show, the other team that we're not going to back down. And, Booker had, some words for Beverly at the end of the game and, to reporter Chris Haynes. And I just think that Beverly, stuck up for, himself, and he stuck up for his teammate. And he said, you're not going to just push us around like that. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at that. But I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I tried to get everything in as quick as I could. It's pretty late here on the West Coast, but like I said, I want everybody to have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with your family, your friends. Enjoy that turkey. Watch some football. Enjoy the World Cup for all those soccer fans out there. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, as well as TikTok and Instagram clips. I want to say thank you, as always, for tuning into the Inquisitive Mamba podcast. This was episode 45. We'll see you next time.